The Marina Cafe's Sunday brunch sparkled with waterfront views and polished silverware, but the tension at our family's teakwood table was anything but serene. I sat in my cotton navy blouse, clearance rack, not couture. They dissected my choices like lawyers preparing for cross-examination, except with less empathy. I'm Natalie Brooks, and in my family's eyes, I'm the 32-year-old who's still figuring things out. I had walked away from our family's real estate empire in Savannah to launch a sustainability analytics startup in Portland. I lived in a converted attic, declined the family trust, and refused the Lexus they tried to hand me for Christmas. I was the anomaly who spent nights debugging code and building dashboards while they hosted wine tastings and auction galas. "Natalie's sweetheart," my mother Caroline began, tone sweet and sharp as grapefruit. "We need to talk about your future." My father, Charles Brooks III, set down his cappuccino like it was a gavel. "It's been, 4 years? When will you admit it's not working?" My brother Preston, darling of the local business awards and VP at Brooks Properties, smirked as he sliced into his Belgian waffle. "Still renting that attic place in St. John's? Do you even get paid?" "I built climate data tools," I said, carefully buttering my toast. Tools I'd just pitched to an energy investor group on Friday, one that had asked for a follow-up meeting. Climate data. Vanessa, my brother's wife, blinked like I'd spoken Martian. Caroline clinked her mimosa on the saucer. "This green tech thing isn't real work, darling. It's starting to embarrass the family." I met her eyes. "Embarrass how?" When Meredith Green asked what you do, I had to say, "Data something. Do you know how that sounds?" "I run a company," I said. Preston laughed. "A company? You mean that app hobby?" Dad's voice dropped, low and final. "Natalie, enough." "More than patient," my father said, steepling his fingers. "But you're 32, Natalie. It's time to grow up and join the real world." "The development division still has an open VP slot," Preston added, as if offering a gift. "Dad can talk to the board. You could ease in, make a real salary." "Stability is attractive," Vanessa chimed in, smiling. "And if you ever want kids, you can't raise them on ideas." I sipped my orange juice, barely flinching. It was obvious they'd coordinated this little ambush over one of their Thursday night wine dinners, the ones I'd quietly stopped attending months ago when these lectures became clockwork. "What do you think I do all day?" I asked, keeping my voice even. Caroline waved a manicured hand. "I'm sure you work hard, sweetheart. But this startup fantasy? It's just not real. Real businesses need capital, connections, strategy, not hope." "If you'd finished law school like you were supposed to," Dad added, "you might understand how the real business world works." I almost laughed. If only they knew about the 7-figure term sheets I'd been offered. The fact that I had 28 employees, office space overlooking the Willamette River, and enterprise contracts lined up for the next 18 months. "You know what Meredith Green's daughter does?" Caroline went on. "She's a federal prosecutor, with a government salary and prestige, not just sitting behind a screen." My phone buzzed sharply against the table. I glanced at it. A 212 number. New York? "Excuse me," I said, rising. "I need to take this." "Natalie," Dad said, "we're talking. This will just take a moment." I stepped away from the table, feeling the cafe's eyes drift our way. "Miss Natalie Brooks," the voice was crisp. "This is Jessica Chin from Forbes. I'm calling to confirm your cover story interview." My breath caught. "Come again?" "Your company, Terrametrics, is our startup of the year." I glanced back through the cafe's tall windows. My family still huddled around their table, probably planning their next strategic concern session over waffles and bottomless mimosas. They had no idea that the daughter they pitied had just been chosen for the cover of Forbes. "This week works perfectly," I managed to say. "Excellent," Jessica replied. "We'd love to highlight your $50 million 0 cents Series B round. And of course, the acquisition offer from Google. Our readers love bootstrapped unicorn stories." $50 million. The number echoed in my head, not because I hadn't heard it before, but because I knew what it meant. It shattered every illusion they clung to about my struggling phase. "I'll have my assistant coordinate the shoot," she added. "Congratulations again, Ms. Brooks. Your story is exactly the kind of innovation we celebrate." "Thank you," I said, my voice calm but electric. I ended the call, slipped my phone into my purse, and turned back toward the table. Inside, my family was still mid-discussion. Judging by their expressions, they were likely strategizing how to rescue me from my career spiral. I walked in slowly. They looked up, expectant, like they'd caught me sneaking in past curfew. "Important call?" Preston asked, barely masking his smirk. "You could say that." Caroline leaned forward. "Natalie, we're trying to help you. This resistance to reality, it's not healthy." "And what do you define as reality, Mom?" "Success," she said firmly. "Stability, respect, things like Forbes magazine." "Exactly," Dad nodded. "Success is about building something real." "Like Forbes?" I asked, tilting my head. Miranda chuckled. "Now that would be impressive." "Funny you mention that," I said, sitting down and setting my phone on the table. That was Forbes calling about my cover story. The silence that fell over the table could have swallowed the marina. Caroline's mimosa paused mid-air. Dad's hands crushed his napkin. Preston blinked. "Cover story?" Caroline whispered. "For what?" Dad asked, stunned. I opened the Forbes app, tapping to the banner that had gone live 2 hours earlier. Rising Stars issue, Terrametrics had just been named Startup of the Year. My phone screen displayed our sleek green and white logo next to the headline. "From Attic to $500 million, 0 cents. Valuation. The Natalie Brooks story." Preston snatched the phone. His eyes darted across the screen. Confusion turned to disbelief. Then something like nausea. $500 million? He croaked. "Valuation," I corrected gently. "The acquisition offers have been higher." Caroline's espresso cup slipped from her fingers, shattering on the cafe's tiled floor. For once, she didn't flinch about the spectacle. "Acquisition offers?" Dad's courtroom voice was barely a whisper now. "Google's been persistent," I said, smoothing my blouse. "Though I'm leaning toward the Tesla partnership. Better synergy with our climate modeling tech." Vanessa blinked like I'd grown antlers. "Tesla? You mean that Tesla?" "The very one. They're interested in our predictive carbon tracking interface." Preston kept scrolling, color draining from his face. "It says here you started it with $5,000, 0 cents? "My tutoring savings from undergrad," I confirmed, "though we just closed Series B at $50 million, 0 cents. $50 million, Caroline echoed, stunned. "The A round was 12, I added lightly. "I didn't bring it up because you all seemed worried about my lack of income." Dad found his voice. "Natalie, how long have you been this successful?" "Depends," I said. "Profitable? 2 years. Industry recognition? 18 months. Life-changing wealth?" I paused, letting it land. "About 6. The manager arrived with a broom, casting side eyes as he swept up the shattered porcelain. Diners nearby leaned in, catching bits of the unfolding family drama. "Why didn't you tell us?" Preston asked, voice hollow. I tilted my head. "Would you have believed me? Or called it another fantasy?" Silence. "You mocked my first investor call. Dad downplayed our first client, and when TechCrunch featured us, Mom told me not to let it go to my head." Their shame was a quiet presence at the table. Caroline finally spoke. "But you still live in that tiny attic apartment." "By choice," I said, smiling. "Some things I build quietly. If you've ever been doubted, dismissed, or told to be realistic, hit subscribe, because the next chapter of my story proves that quiet persistence speaks louder than approval." I landed at NBC News and interviewed for the job, but throughout the interview, I knew. "It's only 3 blocks from the office," I said. "Walking gives me time to think." "In the car?" Dad asked, for what had to be the 10th time this year. "The Toyota Corolla?" I smiled. "Still reliable. Low-profile investors already give me enough attention. I'm not trying to impress car thieves, too." Vanessa was staring at me like I'd morphed into a different person. How many employees do you have? 47, I replied, though we're scaling fast. After the Forbes article, we'll probably get flooded with resumes. Preston set my phone down with slightly trembling hands. The Johnson's son said you were struggling. I raised an eyebrow. The Johnson's son works for our biggest competitor. He knows exactly how we're doing. Their market share's been sliding since our launch. Caroline blinked. Natalie, are you rich? I shrugged. Depends. Can I afford this cafe? Sure. Could I buy the block it's sitting on? Also yes. Never work again? Probably. But I love what I do too much. The silence between us stretched long and awkward, heavy with years of misjudgment. Dad cleared his throat. The cover story. When does it publish? Next week, I said. Jessica said the bootstrap angle really landed. Starting with $5,000, 0 cents, and no family money isn't exactly common in Silicon Valley. Caroline winced. No family money. I never asked, I reminded her. You all made it very clear supporting my fantasy would be enabling failure. Preston shifted uncomfortably. About the partnership at the firm? Still not interested, I said softly. But thank you. We could work together, he pushed. Corporate counsel, contracts, IP. You'll need it. I studied him, calculated charm behind the confusion. We already do, I said. We're with Wilson Crane in San Francisco. They specialize in tech. Dad leaned in. We could handle it better. We're family. A word missing for 5 years, now suddenly convenient again. Dad, I said gently, you specialize in criminal defense and personal injury. Preston does estate planning and commercial real estate. I looked between them. Neither of you is remotely familiar with tech law or venture capital regulations. Caroline jumped in. But we could learn. I'm sure you could, I said not unkindly. But why would I replace the legal team that helped me build a $500 million company with the same people who spent 5 years telling me I was throwing my life away? The question hung in the air like static. My phone buzzed again. This time, I smiled at the screen. Excuse me, I said, standing and answering. Hey, Marcus. Natalie, my CFO said. Have you seen the Forbes announcement? Our website's down. Too much traffic. And we've had 17 acquisition inquiries since this morning. Expected, I said, my eyes drifting across the stunned faces at the table. Any serious ones? 3. All above our target valuation. Let's schedule calls for Tuesday, I said. I've got the Forbes shoot Monday. Ding, got it. Oh, and congrats again, you earned this. Thanks. I hung up and turned back to the table. Business? Dad asked. Always. Success doesn't manage itself. Caroline studied me with a look I couldn't quite place. Natalie, are you happy? That stopped me. It was the last thing I expected her to ask, and maybe the first time she really wanted to know. Very, I said. I love what I do. I love the team we've built, the problems we solve, the purpose. I wake up excited. Even with all the pressure? I laughed lightly. What pressure? We've got 2 years of runway, more demand than we can handle, and offers that could retire my entire team. Preston was still fixated on my phone. 17 acquisition inquiries in one morning? A Forbes effect, I said, though the offers started long before this. Success attracts attention. Vanessa finally broke her silence. Natalie, I owe you an apology. We all do. I looked at her carefully. Apology for what exactly? For not believing in you, for not supporting you. For thinking we knew better, Vanessa said quietly. For calling it a fantasy, Caroline added, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. For saying you were an embarrassment to the family, Dad murmured, eyes downcast. Preston gave a short nod. And for acting like you didn't know what you were doing? I let their words hang in the air for a moment, weighing them. These were the same people who had spent years undermining my decisions, downplaying my progress, and offering concern disguised as control. And now that they knew I was worth more, financially, publicly, professionally, than all of them combined, they wanted to make it right. I appreciate that, I said slowly. But apologies are just words. They looked up at me. The real question is, have you learned anything? Caroline frowned. Learned what? Why I stopped coming to family dinners. Why I didn't tell you about the company. Why I kept my distance. There was a long pause before Dad spoke. Because we weren't really trying to support you. We were trying to mold you into who we thought you should be. Because we judged you by our definitions of success, Preston added. Caroline's face tightened. Because we cared more about how you made us look than about what you were building. And we were wrong, Vanessa finished quietly. About all of it. A waiter hovered nearby, clearly wondering if we'd ever order lunch or just continue staging a family reckoning over cold coffee. Glanced around. Half the room had changed over since we sat down. I should go, I said, standing. Those acquisition calls won't wait. Natalie. Wait, Caroline said. Can we start over? Dinner this week, just family. I paused. What would be different? Everything, she said. We want to learn about your work. Really learn. No more law firm pressure, Preston raised a hand. Swear. No more concern about my apartment or car? Only curiosity, Dad said. No judgment. And no more shame? Caroline winced. I'm embarrassed I ever said that. I looked around the table. Same people, new tone. Maybe a new beginning. Dinner sounds good, I said, but I picked the place. And I'm paying. You don't have to, Dad began. I want to, I interrupted. I can afford it now, remember? As I grabbed my purse, my phone buzzed again. Caller ID, Elon Musk. I blinked, then looked up to see my family watching me with disbelief. I really do need to take this, I said, stepping back. Is that? Preston asked. The Tesla partnership? I nodded. Yes. I answered as I walked out. Hello, Mr. Musk. Natalie, he said. Congrats on the Forbes cover. Well earned. Thank you. Are you ready to change the world? Behind me, Caroline was asking for another coffee cup. In front of me, one of the most influential minds in tech was waiting to collaborate. With me? Always ready, I said, stepping into the Portland sunlight. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving people wrong. It's building something so real, they can't ignore it. As I walked to my Corolla, already thinking through our roadmap, I smiled. Tomorrow brought Forbes, acquisition calls, and more family wanting to reconnect. But today I had a mission. 3 months later, I stood in the glass lobby of Terrametrics as Cruise finalized our expansion. The Forbes feature had catapulted us. New clients, talent, partnerships. Ms. Brooks, my assistant said, tablet in hand. Your family's here for the tour. I turned to see them, Caroline, Dad, Preston, and Vanessa. They'd listened. Preston had studied tech law. Caroline now volunteered teaching code. Send them up, I said. Marcus, start with the Tesla update. As the elevator opened, I saw not just interest, but pride. This place is incredible, Caroline whispered, hugging me. 93 employees, I said. Still growing. The applications are limitless, Dad said. That's the idea, I smiled. We're starting with medical tech, helping paralyzed patients regain movement. Vanessa touched my arm. You're changing lives, Natalie. As we walked, I introduced them to team leads, explained our prototypes and partnerships. They asked thoughtful questions. For once, they saw me as an expert. The acquisition offers? Dad asked. We're staying independent. For now. He nodded. Your grandfather would be proud. He would have understood, Preston said, even when we didn't. As they prepared to leave, Caroline pulled me aside. The Foundation's gala, would you consider being our keynote speaker? You're the biggest success story this city's seen. A year ago, they were embarrassed by me. Now, they wanted me center stage. What would I talk about? Your journey, your vision. People need to know that success can look different. I thought of that girl coding alone in her attic. I'd be honored, I said. Because real victory isn't revenge, it's understanding and building something greater together. The Forbes cover still hangs in my office. not as a trophy, but a reminder. True success isn't about approval, it's about impact, and I was only getting started. I built quietly, doubted often, but never stopped. If you've ever felt overlooked or dismissed, drop a comment below. Tell me your story. Your voice matters. And if life ever makes you feel small, remember, success isn't granted. It's earned one bold step at a time. Keep building. I see you.